What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the Cyclonic Thrift channel. Today we're finally going to start jumping into some cards from the new Outlaws at Thunder Junction Set, starting with today's commander, which really I feel like embodies the spirit of what this set is all about. It's Olivia, Opulent Outlaw. She's 1 and Mardu, so a red, a white, and a black for a 3/3 legendary creature vampire assassin. She has flying and lifelink. And whenever one or more outlaws you control deal combat damage to a player, create a treasure token. And we have a little reminder text here that assassins, mercenaries, pirates, rogues, and warlocks are considered outlaws. Then her second ability is you pay 3, sacrifice 2 treasures, and put 2 +1/+1 counters on each creature you control, and activate only as a sorcery. So right off the bat, this card is... It looks like it's going to take the deck in a very specific direction, and maybe 2 specific directions, you could say. One is you're looking at Outlaw typo, and this is fun. I like the fact that they took a bunch of different creature types and kind of meshed them into one, created a bit of an umbrella term that they can all fit under. So you can pair assassins and warlocks, rogues and mercenaries, that sort of thing, and they will all fit under this whole dealing damage creates treasures, that sort of thing. But then her second ability, where we're pumping our entire team, indicates that we're going into a very combat-heavy strategy, where this is where we're going to try to win the game, is dealing a lot of damage, creating treasures and casting spells, of course, but really trying to pump up our creatures as big as possible. We're trying to go wide, and we're trying to take out our opponents through combat. And I have to say, her second ability, for essentially we're paying 5 mana, right? So we're paying the 3 and then sacrificing 2 treasures, which otherwise we could use for mana. So essentially we're using up 5 mana and putting 2 +1/+1 counters on each creature. Outside of green, the fact that she doesn't have green in her color identity, paying 5 mana for a repeatable 2 +1/+1 counter on each creature is a pretty significant pump that you really don't see out of like mono green +1/+1 counter decks. Mardu's pretty good about combat related things, but this specific repeatable permanent sort of pump with the counters as opposed to the static effects is something that is going to be really cool. And I think this deck kind of really builds itself in that we're going to put a ton of outlaws in this deck. We're going to put a ton of treasure themes into this deck. We're trying to get a ton of payoffs from creating and sacrificing those treasures. But ultimately, we're going to try to beat our opponents through combat damage with our outlaws. So first, I just want to kind of go through a bunch of outlaws or creatures that fit under the outlaw moniker that I'm going to put in this deck. The first is Zentarim Bandit, 1 and a black for a 2/1 creature halfling rogue. Whenever it attacks, we can pay 1 life, and if we do, we create a treasure token. So it fits into 2 themes, right? It's a rogue, so it's an outlaw. It has an attack trigger, so it already wants to be in that combat attacking phase. It creates treasures when we attack. So we don't necessarily have to hit, but if we do hit, we're creating 2 treasures for 1 life. It's a really good payoff and a really good rate. Next is Flesh Taker. It's a white and a black for a 2/2 creature human assassin. A little weird here. The assassin obviously fits into the outlaw theme, but I honestly was like, it's kind of like a cow mask. It looks like it's standing in corn. That seems pretty cowboy, western, that sort of thing. So I was like, flavor-wise, it's still in there. And I did notice as I was building the deck that a lot of the creatures we put in here have death triggers of some kind. So I did want to put in some sacrifice outlets, some ways to kind of control when and where we're getting those abilities. So Flesh Taker having a sacrifice outlet on it is going to be really helpful. It's going to be a really nice value piece as we go forward. And then speaking of death triggers, Impulsive Pilferer is a 1 red for a 1/1 creature goblin pirate. Again, pirate fits into that outlaw theme. When it dies, you create a treasure token. And then it has Encore for 3 and a red. So you exile it from the graveyard. You create a token that for each opponent attacks it. Maybe they don't get through for damage, but then you sacrifice them at the end of the end step, and they will all create treasures that way. So maybe we get this guy out early, we start dealing combat damage with him, eventually he dies, creates a treasure token, we just encore him, create 3 more treasure tokens. It really helps support that side of things. But once, as we're creating all these treasures, we want to be able to have payoffs that give us value when we do that, right? Outside of Olivia's mass pump effect. So cards like Reckless Fireweaver, 1 in a red for a 1/3 creature human artificer. Whenever an artifact enters the battlefield under your control, it deals 1 damage to each opponent. So this is going to be a great way to keep pinging our opponents down, keeping their life totals low, keeping them within striking distance of a really strong combat. Kellogg, Dangerous Mind, is 1 a black and a red, 3/2 legendary creature human mercenary, actually from the new Fallout set, so a relatively new card here. He has first strike and haste, so again, nice keywords for a combat-based deck. Mercenary fits into the Outlaw theme. Whenever he attacks, we create a treasure token, right on brand, and then we can sacrifice 5 treasures and gain control of target creature for as long as you control Kellogg, and activate only as a sorcery. So again, we're going to be making a ton of treasures here, and yes, we'll want to pump things up with Olivia, but if there's a really tasty piece on the board somewhere else, and we just want to, bring that guy, put it on our battlefield, see if we can do something with it instead. Kellogg is going to be really, really nice in that situation. And then finally, we've got Brass's Bounty, 6 in a red for a sorcery. For each land you control, create a treasure token. Super simple. We are just looking to make a ton of treasures with this card. It's definitely a late game card, and a card that hopefully you can use as a bit of a finisher. Activate Olivia a couple times, with Reckless Fireweaver, ping all your opponents down for a good amount. This, if you use it right, should either win you the game or get you in the position to be the heavy favorite. But then we also I wanted to put in some cards that help our combat, our attack strategy as well. So cards that maybe they don't fit in the Outlaw theme, they're not quite as flavorful as some of the other cards, but cards that are really going to push forward that combat strategy. And the first one is Audric Lunarch Marshal, 3 in a white for a 3/3 legendary creature human soldier. At the beginning of each combat, creatures you control gain an ability for... Instead of reading all this, I'm just going to paraphrase. If one of your creatures has flying, at the beginning of combat, all your creatures gain flying. If one of your creatures has hexproof, at the beginning of combat, all your creatures gain hexproof. And 2 things for this. So 1, with Olivia out, automatically all your creatures are going to get flying and lifelink. So evasion and life gain are going to be super key, really big ones. We also have a ton of cards in here that have different keywords as well, so we're going to be able to share the love with that a lot. And secondly, it's the beginning of each combat, so not just yours. So on other people's combat, when they try to attack into you, you're going to gain these effect abilities, and just make yourself a less tasty target for combat attacks, because all your creatures are going to be pumped up with all these keywords. Next is Port Razor, 3 and 2 red for a 4/4 creature orc pirate. So the pirate fits in the Outlaw theme. And then whenever it deals combat damage to a player, untap each creature you control. And after this combat phase, there is an additional combat phase. And then he can't attack a player he has already attacked this turn. So, this is super straightforward. You want to try to find the weakest defended player, attack them first so you can get that extra combat. With this, you'll be able to create a ton of treasures if you can get even just 1 extra combat, and you'll be able to take down your opponents even faster. Then finally, we've got Disrupt Decorum. It's 2 and 2 red for a sorcery. Super simple. We go to all creatures we don't control. It's just going to open everybody up to our attack on our next turn. It's going to help do some of our work for us as our opponents either attack into heavy defenses and lose some of their creatures, or take down some of their opponent's life totals. Cards like this sometimes can kind of, cause some animosity on the table and get them to band against you a little bit, try to work together to take you down, but if you cast this in the right spot, then it shouldn't matter. That brings us to the vegetable portion of the deck. For those of you who haven't seen the channel before, the vegetable portion is where I go through some categories of cards that fit into what I call the vegetables of building a budget deck. the things that you have to focus on, you have to pay attention to if you're building budget, because otherwise you're not going to be able to build a consistent enough performing deck to compete with the higher budget, higher power decks at the table. So those categories are ramp, card draw, and removal, and I'm just going to go through a few cards in each of those categories real quick. So the first is Arcane Signet, 2 mana for an artifact. You add 1 mana of any color in your commander's color identity. Super straightforward, should be in pretty much every single commander deck, and I'm sure you guys have seen it before. The next is Shiny Impetus. It's 2 and a red for an enchantment aura. You enchant a creature, it gets +2/+2 and is goaded, and then whenever he attacks, you create a treasure token. So there's a couple benefits here. One, you can either kind of take one of your opponent's creatures and turn them into your personal bruiser. You pump him up, you make sure he attacks your opponents. You can do this to somebody's commander, you can do this to their scariest creature. If you wanted, you could do it to your own creature, give him +2/+2. If you want to do it to Olivia, make her a 5/5 flyer with lifelink. That's not a horrible strategy, but really we want to be creating those treasure tokens, so it doesn't really matter where the enchantment goes as long as we're generating those tokens off of it. And the second one is somewhat similar. It's a Sticky Fingers, 1 red for an enchantment aura. You enchant a creature, gives it menace, and whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, create a treasure token. And then when this enchanted creature dies, you draw a card. So not quite the same as Shiny Impetus, because you actually have to make contact in order to create that treasure, but giving it menace, that extra evasion is really nice. Having that extra incentive for when it dies, we draw a card is nice. So this is going to fit really well in this deck. But speaking of card draw, the next is Audacious Thief. It's 2 and a black for a 2/2 creature human rogue. Whenever he attacks, you draw a card and lose a life. Super simple, super easy. We're going to be attacking with our rogues, with all of our outlaws. So this is going to be a nice repeatable effect. Hopefully that will get us an extra card on each of our turns for 3, 4, 5 turns, depending on how the game goes. The next is Demand Answers, 1 and a red for an instant. An additional cost, you can either sacrifice an artifact or discard a card. If we want to sacrifice a treasure or something like that, shouldn't be too difficult. But then we draw 2 cards off of this. Then we've got Sign in Blood, classic black card draw spell. It's 2 black for sorcery. Target player draws 2 cards and loses 2 life. So super simple. With black card draw, you kind of have to do this payoff where you pay life or sacrifice something or discard a card. So it's not too bad. But with Olivia gaining us life, with other creatures gaining us life, then paying life for cards like this should not be too much of a problem. In terms of removal, we've got cards like Royal Assassin. It's 1 and 2 black for a creature human assassin. Also fits in that outlaw themed. And you can tap it to destroy target tapped creature. There's a lot of restrictions here. One, it's a tap ability, so you kind of have to wait until it doesn't have summoning sickness. It can only target tapped creatures, which not ideal, but if we're doing things like goading our creatures with Shiny Impetus or Disrupt Decorum, we're gonna be able to find some pretty juicy targets. And more likely than not, you're gonna be playing decks that want to deal combat damage or have tapped abilities. So there's gonna be plenty of targets for this. And even if there aren't, this is a bit of a incentive for our opponents to not use their deck to the fullest potential, because they know we have this, and we can kind of pick off their creatures if they decide to get too aggressive in combat or use any of their tap abilities. Despark is a 1 and a black for an instant. Exile target permanent with mana value 4 or greater. So, a little restrictive with that mana value limitation, but again, a lot of the big scary things that we have to deal with are going to be a higher mana value of 4 or higher, so it's going to hit most of the things we want to hit, and exiling it and permanent, that versatility is going to be really nice. And then Blood Money, just very flavorful. 5 and 2 black for a sorcerer. You destroy all creatures, and for each non-token creature destroyed this way, you create a tapped treasure token. So the biggest thing about recovering after a board wipe is you want to be able to regroup and recover faster than your opponents. And creating those treasures not only will, aid us for when we get Olivia back out there, but it's going to help just pay for our rebuilding process. So it's a bit pricey for a board wipe. I totally get that. 7 mana is a lot, but it's going to pay us back because it very well could create 7, 10, 13 treasures. That brings us to the Thrift pick of the deck. For those who haven't seen the channel before, the Thrift pick is the card that maybe I don't necessarily think is the best card in the deck, objectively speaking, but it's the card that I'm most excited to play. Sometimes those match up and sometimes they don't. But for this deck, it's Audric, Master Tactician. It's 2 and 2 white for a 3/4 legendary creature human soldier. Has first strike, and whenever Audric, Master Tactician, and at least 3 other creatures attack, you choose which creatures block this combat and how those creatures block. So I've never actually gotten to... I can't say I've played this card in many decks, but even the decks I have played in, I've never been able to actually get that off. So I would be super excited if I'd be able to get this off in this deck, because one, it's just a super fun thing to do just in real life in the table. Be like, all right, I'm going to attack, and everybody, don't worry about blocking. I'll get to choose. All your good creatures are probably going to die, and I'm going to hit you for a bunch of damage. In this particular deck can absolutely win you the game. Not only are we going to be dealing a ton of combat damage, but we're going to guarantee a lot of our creatures that, create treasure tokens when they hit. And so we're going to get all those combat damage triggers. We're going to get all those attack triggers. It's going to give us a ton of peace of mind when we're attacking. Yeah, this card is going to be sick if you can manage to get this off. And I don't think it'll be too difficult in this deck, because we're going to have a lot of creatures out at the time and are going to be able to, maximize the ability that way. That brings us to the end of the video. Hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you guys have been taking a look and enjoying the new Outlaws of Thunder Junction set. I know there's a lot of really unique commanders, really unique cards out there. I'm excited for the next couple weeks to continue to dive into them. If you can think of any cards that I should have included or might have looked over when building this deck, please comment down below, let me know. If you haven't already, please subscribe, like the video, and until next time, stay safe and stay thrifty.